So, and I have to ask myself to make my presentation now. Okay, so I will talk about the status of Eastern Imperial Eagles in Hungary, especially in the last 5 years, but I will make remarks in the last 40 years of the population development. Sorry, but I didn't put any slides due to the lack of time on reasons of mortality and diet, but we have a very similar situation like it was shown by Johannes in Austria. So the European brown hair is absolutely the main prey, and persecution, especially poisoning, is absolutely the main cause of deaths in Hungary. So Hungary is just a little bit more east to Austria, but still, if we have a look at on the distribution of the Imperial Eagles, it is on the very far west side of the distribution. Which is unique in our region is that we have this Pannonian ecoregion, which is a little bit like not little bit, but very much like the steppe habitats or forest steppe habitats of Eastern Europe and Asia. So we have this population in the Pannonian Basin in 6 countries recently. It is basically isolated from the other populations of the species. It's also proved by genetic analysis and by ringing recoveries and satellite tracking. If we look back to the situation, MME BirdLife Hungary was founded in 1974 when my colleagues started to collect data on the strictly protected raptor species. And they found that also the Eastern Imperial Eagle was on the very brink of extinction in Hungary. It was found only in a few places in remote mountain forest habitats and already extinct from several previously known habitats. It became strictly protected for a long time, but as we mentioned, persecution, poisoning, shooting of the nests and birds was going on till the 70s. So the total population was around between 10 and 20 pairs during these years, as my colleagues published. It was in the first 20 years of the monitoring, my colleagues observed a minimum 3 times increase in 20 years. And by 2000, the population reached around 60 breeding pairs in Hungary. So the aim of this presentation will be to show you how our population developed in these already more than 40 years of period. I was focusing mostly in my presentation on the density dependence of our population. I mean that as the population increases, usually the hypothesis of ecology says that the breeding success should decrease, and mortality should increase, which in general leads to a stabilization of the population, which is not really the case now in Hungary yet. And another issue, which I will mention at the end, is about a sustainable monitoring system, because our growing population is growing more quickly than our capacities. Regarding the methods, as I mentioned, in the 1980s, the Imperial Eagle was a completely different species like now. It was a remote mountain species breeding in forests in the northern part of the country mainly. And already from the 1990s, it started to move down to the lowlands. And by the years in 2000, already solitary trees and group of trees in open landscapes in agricultural habitats and grasslands became the most important habitats. Started by my colleagues, especially Tamás Szitta, János Bagyura, and others. There was a lot of conservation efforts and monitoring efforts executed in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000 years. I just listed some of them. I already showed it 5 years ago, and which meant a different approach thanks to consecutive European Union funded LIFE project. From 2012, our main focus for the Imperial Eagle conservation was primarily set to the anti-poisoning activities. I'm not going into details. We had a presentation and poster also 5 years ago. Our dog unit and my colleagues are operating continuously in all poisoning cases in Hungary. And we also started to improve our monitoring methods during the last years, especially the drone surveys helped a lot in covering the population. If you look on the main processes of the population dynamics of Imperial Eagles, we can see that there are many phases, many stages in the breeding stage of the birds, which are usually unknown. Of course, the general surveys were focusing on the population monitoring in the early decades. I mean, the breeding pairs were searched and the breeding success was monitored. Later, with the help of ringing, color ringing, satellite tracking, we could get data on the mortality and dispersal of the juvenile non-breeding birds, immature birds. And finally, thanks to the genetic tracking based on non-invasively collected feathers, we could also estimate the mortality or the survival rate of the adult breeding birds in the population. So all these parameters could be quite well estimated, and we could build simple population viability analysis based on the parameters of our population. Recently in my presentation, I will focus on this population monitoring part and not go into details in others. So we have a territory coordinator system, which we call. It means that especially the ranger service of the Hungarian National Park directorates are in close cooperation with us, and we set up a system that each Imperial Eagle territory has a coordinator, and they are collecting the data more or less in the same methods. Regarding the annual monitoring activities, we do the same as in most of the countries. We usually do at least 3 or 4 controls per nest site after searching the nests in February, March, before the leaves start growing on the trees. Then we check the incubation, if it started. And the most important part of the monitoring activity is happening in June, when usually 2 to 4 teams in the country work parallelly, and we are visiting all known nest sites of Imperial Eagles in a 2 or 3 weeks period. And we collect standardized data on data sheets on each breeding pair. So this is more or less the base of our breeding population monitoring. And afterwards, in July and August, usually we also check the nest sites if the chicks fledge successfully, but it is not happening every time. Regarding the methods, there is a quite significant change, as previously the remote surveys of the nest sites was a quite common way of determining the breeding success, which was of course not a very precise method, because especially the larger broods could be easily underestimated. Recently, this method is mostly done only in those cases when the breeding are failed in an earlier period. In those cases when there is a chick or active breeding in the nest, in June we usually climb to the trees with the help of my colleagues. And in the last years, the usage of drones increased a lot. So you can see that previously we managed to climb up to 60% of the nest sites in the country. Recently, we control around 2/3 of the nests with the help of drones. You can see that quite a large number of nesting events have been surveyed. More than 5,000 chicks fly from the nest sites. So regarding the results, you can see that the population increased continuously during the last more than 40 years. We can say that after improved monitoring, we had a more or less clear picture on the population by 1989. It was around 20 pairs, and by now it became almost 400 pairs. Sorry, I will tell you why I didn't put the 2023 data yet to the figure. So you can see that an annual 11% increase was observed. Also, the proportion of lowland breeders became absolutely evident. By now, we have only a very few pairs in the mountain forests, and more than 99% of the population is in the lowlands. Here you can see some figures, how the population evolved in just 20 years. This is how the population stepped to the southern direction in every 10 years. Since the last conference, you can see that these areas have been colonized by the species, but in the core area, the density also increased a lot. You can see here how it was, for example, in 2000 and how it is in 2022. The average nearest neighbor distance decreased from 9 kilometers to 6, and the average territory size from 67 to 31. But even in the best habitats, it can be only around 10 square kilometer. It is just a theoretical figure about showing how the nearest neighbor distance differs in the different parts of the population. You can see that in the very best habitats, the nearest neighbors can be even less than 3 kilometers to each other. In the still good habitats, it is around 5. And on the worse habitats, it is around 8 to 10 kilometers. And we also have some pairs which are colonizing new areas, which is also quite visible. So if we look at on the population trend, we can see that we can be in an exponential increase, but most probably we are very close to a turning point when the population start to be stabilized. Also, the annual increase of the population is still going on. And also, which is really interesting, the annual breeding success is also still increasing by 1%. In 2012, you can see that the success rate almost reached 2 chicks per successful pair, which is one of the highest in the distribution area of the species. Also, which we can see is that although the annual productivity is increasing, it is seems to be stabilized. So we expect again stabilization. This is the annual change. If it reaches 0, it means that the productivity stabilized. So we seems to be quite close to that point. It's just a subsample. I have no time to go into details. It is in the Heves Plain. This is interesting because we are in this habitat is already more or less saturated. So there is still a population increase, but it is only 2% annually, and already the productivity started to decrease. So we expect something similar soon in the whole population. So just to sum up, we can say that the population is still increasing, still only a starting signs of density dependence has been showed, which means that there are still many suitable habitats unoccupied in the country. And for the future of monitoring, I mentioned you that there is no capacity to continue this monitoring effort. So from this year, we have started a new way of monitoring, which is a multi-level system, which means that we set up 3 areas where we would like to monitor all possible breeding parameters. There are 10 territories altogether where we are executing ringing activity, and there are 20 territories in the country geographically distributed where we precisely determine the breeding success with the help of drones. So this is just a picture how we do in the first class of the monitoring system, that we check the nest sites in every breeding stage, in egg, in small chick, medium chick, and large chick periods. So we can have a data set like that. Until now, we only had medium chick numbers for the population. So in this small sample sizes, we will have a clear picture in the next years how the different stages are going on during the breeding success. And just one interesting slide, in 2 years ago, we had a possible world record. At least I couldn't collect any information about successfully fledged for chick brood, which happened in Hungary, fortunately. So I would like to thank all the people who helped a lot during the last decades, all the fundraising organizations, especially the European Union's Life Fund. So thank you for the attention. This is just a photo how the buzzards can get to the nests of the imperial eagles. We had 5 cases when eagles raised buzzard chicks. And sorry, I was too long, so there is no time for questions, but in the discussion you can